So now we enter into the topic of romantic love. We've explored a bit about what addiction is and how we're starting to see it as a behavioral addiction and what that means. So, is romantic love an addiction? Can it be an addiction? Many scholars argue that we are, in fact, evolutionarily designed to be addicted to our mate, that the falling in love process is a naturally positive, quote unquote, addiction. And the reason they argue that is that evolutionarily and biologically, they would say that we are meant to search out in our environment as we go through adolescence into adulthood to find potential mates. We look around, we look for someone who catches our attention or catches our eye or who we really have some chemistry with or like at some level. And that initial lust, that initial sex drive will get us to fixate on one given mate. And when you fixate long enough, you are meant to fall in love with them so that you want to touch them, so that you think about them, you want to spend time with them. You will eventually have sex with them, get pregnant, have a child together. And it's this evolutionary love drive that will make you stay long enough to ensure the survival of your child. And so, in essence, what they're saying is that your lover becomes your addictive stimulus. And this is really very specific to falling in love with someone. So, you're not going to fall in love with everyone you date, right? And we know that our patients aren't going to fall in love with everyone they date. So, it's really those love relationships where your lover is the addictive stimulus. And when you think about those 6 qualities that we just talked about, the components of Griffiths that make something addictive, and apply it to romantic love, you can really start to see that it is a naturally positive, quote unquote, addiction if it's going well. So, for example, picture someone who is falling in love. The lover becomes the most important person in their life, sometimes at the expense of everything else. Being around a lover can modify your mood. They make you feel amazing. Our patients will come in and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, I'm euphoric. I get giddy. I get goosebumps. I talk about them. I'm thinking about them. I feel amazing." You develop tolerance, meaning you want to spend more and more time together. You want to plan for a future together. People who come into therapy will say, my entire world is revolving around them, as though they are the most important, the best, the most wonderful person in my life. Withdrawal, when you're not around them, you're thinking about them. Our patients will say, I can't stop thinking about them. I wake up in the morning and I check my phone because I want to see if they texted me, or I'm fascinated and thinking about what our life could look like in the future. I'm planning for our next trip. I want to know when we can move in together. I want to name our next pet dog or our future children. There's this huge withdrawal element where you want to be with them. And even when you're not with them, you're planning for use, essentially. And then we have conflict and relapse. And so when you think about romantic love as potentially a positive addiction, it has these first 4 elements very clearly. But whether there's any conflict or relapse really depends on the nature of your relationship, how well it's going, if it's healthy for you, if your partner wants you back. And so if your relationship is healthy and it's going well, it won't have necessarily these elements of conflict and relapse. It will just have this sort of fantasyland, euphoric honeymoon stage of love that feels very addictive based on the first 4 components. And there is really an emerging body of research to support love as a naturally addictive process, that it's a natural addiction. With regard to neurobiology, there is a large amount of research that suggests that falling in love increases brain activity in regions that are associated with motivation, with cravings, with desires that promote survival. It's a very old part of your brain. It's associated with our survival as a species. And this is a very basic picture from NIDA, from the National Institute of Health, that really looks at the dopaminergic reward pathway, which is really what we're talking about when we're talking about that addictive nature of behavior and certainly of love. That it starts in the ventral tegmental area, moves through the nucleus accumbens and up to the prefrontal cortex. And you will see shifts in the brain activation in dopamine in particular, large increases of dopamine when you're with your lover, if you're in love with them, decreases in serotonin to some degree, shifts in glutamate, in norepinephrine, those stress hormones. You'll also see shifts in testosterone and estrogen and all of these sort of biologically based regions and areas and neurotransmitter and hormone levels that are associated with addiction, with addictive behavior, with falling for something and having it be the fixation of your life. And a lot of this research was pioneered by Helen Fisher, and I highly recommend you look up her stuff if you're interested in behavioral addictions and all, and certainly in love as an addictive process. She started doing research, brain-based research in the early 2000s. And just based on self-report, she found that people who are in love report that they think about their lover 85% of the time that they're awake, which is pretty remarkable when you think about those 6 components of addictive behavior, that lends itself to the importance, the salience factor very directly, that this lover is the most important thing in your life when you're in love. And then she did a number of brain-based fMRI studies looking at what happens to your brain when you are looking at an image of your lover or thinking about your lover. And what she found was essentially all of the dopaminergic reward areas are activated. She did this in people who reported that they were madly in love. She did it in samples of people who said they were madly in love after 20 years of marriage. She also did studies looking at people who said they were madly in love but broken up. And for those individuals, particularly those who were rejected in love, where they fell in love with someone, but their mate didn't really want to be with them back, it activated the exact same brain regions. So the conclusion here is there really is a large amount of neurobiological emerging research to suggest that our brains light up in the presence of our falling in love lover in much the same way that they do with drugs of abuse. There's also a great deal of psychological research that lends support for love as an addictive process, because really, from a psychological perspective and a mental health perspective, love is really a survival-based need, which you all probably know all too well at this point, that we literally can't survive as infants without food, without shelter. Maslow's hierarchy, we need to be cared for, or we will not make it as infants. We literally will die if we don't have someone to take care of us in those early years. And really a large body of research pioneered by Mary Ainsworth and John Bowlby, looking at how much we need an attachment figure in our early years to develop in healthy ways, that some infants can survive if they don't have love, but they will not thrive. And in fact, the more they feel unsafe and unloved in early childhood without an ability to attach to a safe, loving caregiver, will strongly predict how much difficulty they have in their relationships as adults, certainly in their romantic relationships as an adult, but also in terms of their overall mental health functioning and physical health functioning. And so really thinking about early childhood learning, what makes for a loving relationship? Was the parent able to securely attach to their child, and was the child able to securely attach to their parent, is a realm that we in the mental health world are really good at exploring. And we know that the more adverse childhood experiences people have, the more chronic stress, the more trauma, having a parent with a mental health condition, having a parent who is incarcerated, all of those things can very strongly affect our ability to connect with romantic partners as adults.